I took the lottery ticket, and I'm gone for good. That's what he wrote in the note, thinking he had stolen her $10 million. But when he opened his bag later that night, it was just a blank sheet of paper. And by the time he came back, the unbelievable had happened. Before we continue, subscribe for more interesting stories, like and share. Now, let's dive into the story. They say money changes people, but sometimes it simply reveals who they were all along. The rain had just stopped when Sarah stood in the kitchen, her heart thudding so loud she could hear it echo through the tiles. She gripped the lottery ticket in one hand and stared at the numbers on her phone in the other, checking them again and again. She wasn't dreaming. Not this time. "Mark," she called, breathless, her voice trembling. "Come quick." He walked in slowly, wiping his hands with a dish towel. "What's wrong?" She looked at him, her eyes wide, her voice barely above a whisper. "We won the lottery. $10 million. For a second, Mark didn't react. He blinked, then forced a wide smile. "Are you serious?" Sarah nodded, her hands shaking as she placed the ticket on the table between them. "Every number, it's all here. We're millionaires, Mark." He pulled her into a hug, firm, a little too firm, and whispered, "That's incredible." But behind her back, his eyes weren't smiling. They were calculating. Sarah didn't notice. She was already crying, happy tears. She began talking fast about what they could finally do. Pay off their mortgage, help her sister, maybe open that little bakery she always dreamed of. Mark said all the right things, but his mind wasn't with her. It was on the drawer, the one beside the bed, where she always kept important things. And as Sarah dreamed of a future together, Mark began planning his escape. When some men smile, it's not joy, it's strategy. Later that evening, the living room buzzed with possibilities. Sarah sat cross-legged on the couch, a notepad in hand, scribbling ideas for how they'd use the money. Her face was glowing, her voice filled with gratitude. "We could finally fix the roof. Maybe send your mom on that vacation she's always wanted." Mark chuckled from the armchair, sipping whiskey. Yeah, sure. We can do all that." But his eyes didn't match his laugh. They were distant, unfocused, watching her, and something else entirely. Sarah kept talking. "I mean, it's life-changing, right? 10 million. It's like a dream. I still can't believe it." He nodded slowly. "Me neither." That night, she placed the ticket back in the drawer, the one she always kept locked. But she didn't lock it this time. She was too excited, too trusting. She kissed Mark's forehead, whispered, "Good night," and went to bed with her heart full. Mark remained on the couch, staring at the ceiling. When he finally stood, he moved quietly. He walked to the bedroom door and listened, soft breathing, deep sleep. Then he walked to the drawer and pulled it open just a crack. There it was, the lottery ticket, tucked between a few old papers. He didn't take it. Not yet. But the sight of it changed something in him. His jaw clenched. His breathing slowed. And in his mind, one phrase began to repeat. "You don't get second chances like this twice." He closed the drawer, walked away, and smiled to himself in the mirror. But this time, the smile didn't even try to hide the lie. He could have walked into the future with her. Instead, he chose the exit. It was 2:13 a.m. The only sound in the house was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Sarah slept soundly, her face still wearing the faintest trace of a smile. But Mark was wide awake. He moved like a shadow, every step measured, quiet, careful. A duffel bag sat open on the bed. Clothes, toiletries, cash, all already packed. Now all that was left was the prize. He crept to the drawer, heart pounding. He opened it gently, eyes scanning the papers inside. Receipts, a birthday card, an old bank statement, and then a folded slip with numbers on it. He didn't think twice. He grabbed it, shoved it in his bag, and closed the drawer without noticing the real ticket, still tucked underneath a utility bill just below. He reached for the pen and paper beside the lamp. In rushed handwriting, he scrawled, "I'm leaving with your lottery ticket. I'm tired of this miserable life with you. Don't bother looking for me. I'm gone for good." He didn't even sign it, just folded it and placed it carefully on the pillow beside her. He stood for a moment, staring at her sleeping figure. But there was no remorse, only satisfaction. He slung the bag over his shoulder and walked out the door, not knowing he'd just traded $10 million for a blank piece of paper. And while he stepped into the night feeling rich, fate was smiling, waiting to show him just how poor he really was. She thought the worst thing that could happen was losing the ticket. But what hurt more was losing the man who never truly loved her. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting soft streaks across the bed. Birds chirped faintly outside, the city slowly stirring awake. It was supposed to be a morning of celebration, one that started with breakfast in bed, laughter, and maybe a silly internet search. What do you do when you win the lottery? But when Sarah stretched and reached for her phone, she felt something strange under her pillow. A piece of paper. She sat up slowly, heart skipping. It was Mark's handwriting. Her smile faded as she read each word aloud. I'm leaving with your lottery ticket. I'm tired of this miserable life with you. Don't bother looking for me. I'm gone for good. Her lips trembled. Her chest tightened. No, no, this has to be a joke, she whispered. She called out. Mark, silence. She rushed out of bed, checked the bathroom. Empty. Kitchen, untouched. His shoes by the door gone. The coat he wore when they first met, missing. Gone. Just like that. Tears filled her eyes as she leaned against the kitchen counter, shaking. Her husband of 5 years, the man she cooked for, cried with, prayed for, had stolen from her and left her behind like garbage. Not even a goodbye. Just cruelty. I don't understand, she whispered through tears. Why now? Why this wet? She looked down at the note again. The part that cut deepest wasn't the stolen ticket. It was, I'm tired of this miserable life with you. That line didn't just bruise, it crushed. She had dreamed of giving him the world, and he ran from it like she was the burden. For 10 minutes, she cried on the floor. The kind of cry that doesn't make a sound, just shakes the body and drains the soul. Then, something flickered. A small voice in her heart. Soft but steady. Check the drawer. She sat up, wiped her face, and looked down the hallway, at the drawer where she'd last kept the ticket. And slowly she stood. Because sometimes, the same drawer that holds your heartbreak also holds your freedom. He took everything, or so he thought. But fate had one last surprise waiting in the drawer. Sarah walked slowly down the hallway, her body still trembling. The house felt like a shell now. Familiar walls, familiar air, but suddenly hollow. Like everything warm had vanished when he walked out the door. Her bare feet pressed against the wooden floor as she approached the small bedside drawer. The drawer she always used for important things. Passports, receipts, certificates, and the ticket. The ticket she held with trembling joy just hours ago. The same one he claimed to have taken. She stopped in front of it, staring like it was some kind of tomb. Part of her didn't want to open it. She feared the emptiness, the finality of finding it gone. But that voice, that strange little nudge in her chest said again, check. With a breath, she slowly pulled the drawer open. And there it was, folded, sitting quietly beneath a water bill and an old recipe card. The lottery ticket, the real one, untouched. Sarah blinked. Once, twice, not believing her eyes. She picked it up gently, checking the numbers. The same ones she'd memorized. The same ones she'd matched. $10 million. Still hers. Still here. Her hand went to her mouth as a sound escaped. Part laugh, part sob, part disbelief. He didn't even check, she whispered. He took the wrong paper. She dropped to her knees, laughing through tears. The same drawer he thought held his new beginning had tricked him. She looked over at the note again on the floor, shaking her head. He ran, with nothing. And in that instant, something changed inside her. The heartbreak was still there, yes. But under it power. He left thinking he had stolen everything. But what he really stole was an old receipt. And what she kept was her freedom, her fortune, and her future. Sarah stood up straighter, wiped her tears. No more begging. No more chasing. Only one word remained in her heart now. Leave. He thought he'd outsmarted her. But the only thing he outsmarted was himself. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, the ticket in one hand, and a crumpled piece of paper in the other, the note he left. Her eyes moved back and forth between them, piecing together what had happened. She opened the drawer wider, curiosity now replacing sorrow. She carefully shuffled through the rest of the contents, and then she saw it. A second paper. Folded sloppily, slightly torn at the edge. An old appointment reminder from her dentist. That was what he had taken. She held it up, realizing it was the same thickness, same fold as the lottery slip. In his haste, Mark had grabbed the first paper he saw and ran, assuming victory. She let out a dry chuckle. That's what you left me for. The absurdity of it all hit her at once. He had betrayed their marriage, their memories, and the woman who stood beside him during job losses, illness, and unpaid bills, all for a blank scrap of paper. No letter, no closure, no goodbye, just greed, and a mistake. Sarah stood up slowly and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but something new flickered behind them, something fierce. She looked down at the winning ticket in her hand and nodded to herself. "You didn't take anything from me, Mark," she said quietly. "You gave me something, a clean break, and 10 million reasons to never look back." She folded the real ticket and slipped it into a new place, not in a drawer, but inside her purse, zipped and locked. Then she picked up her phone, the lottery office, the real estate agent, the travel site. One by one, she began making moves. He ran from her thinking he'd won, but all he really did was set her free. He thought this was the start of his freedom. But freedom built on betrayal never lasts long. The taxi rolled to a stop in front of the seaside hotel. Sleek glass walls, golden lighting, and a scent of imported eucalyptus wafting through the revolving doors. Mark stepped out with the swagger of a man who'd just escaped his own boring life. He wore dark sunglasses, a fresh shirt, and a cocky half-smile that hadn't left his face since he slipped out of the house. Duffel bag in hand, he walked into the lobby like royalty returning from exile. "Reservation for Kane," he said to the receptionist with a charming grin. The woman at the desk typed a few things on the keyboard and smiled back. "Welcome, Mr. Kane. We have you in our top-floor suite, Ocean View. 2 nights for now, correct?" "Let's make it 4, he said, patting his bag. "I've got plans." As he was handed the key card, he already began fantasizing. This was just the beginning, a warm-up for the life that lay ahead. Private jets, Italian villas, a sports car or 2, and women, the kind who didn't ask questions or care about love. He laughed to himself in the elevator. Sarah will wake up and realize she's been outplayed. She never saw it coming. When he entered the suite, the curtains were already drawn wide, revealing the ocean waves crashing gently in the distance. He tossed the bag on the bed, kicked off his shoes, and opened the minibar. "Here's to me," he muttered, clinking a small bottle of champagne against the glass. To no more stress. No more boring dinners. No more pretending. He pulled out the folded paper from the inner pocket of his duffel bag, the one he believed held his entire future. He kissed it. "La vida nueva," he whispered. "My new life." With dramatic flair, he unfolded it to take one last look at his golden ticket. And froze. Blank. His eyes scanned it again. No numbers. No logo. Just a faint, smudged reminder about Dr. Elaine. Thursday, 10:30 a.m. He blinked. Then blinked again. What? He ripped open the bag and began pulling everything out. Shirts, toiletries, power bank, socks, but no lottery ticket. Just that one worthless paper. "No, no, no, no," he hissed. His heart began to race. This wasn't victory. This wasn't revenge. This was a miscalculation with a $10 million price tag. Mark staggered back onto the bed, holding the paper in both hands, staring at it like it might change if he stared hard enough. But it didn't. He hadn't won. He'd just run from the only person who truly cared. The problem with stolen dreams is they don't belong to you. Mark sat motionless on the edge of the hotel bed, the worthless slip of paper crumpled in his hand. His confident smirk had drained away, replaced by confusion, then dread. He unfolded it again. Still blank. Still meaningless. "Where is it?" he muttered, voice rising with each syllable. He yanked the bag back onto his lap and unzipped every pocket. First the main compartment, his shirts, a half-empty cologne bottle, a phone charger. Nothing. Then the side pockets, hotel receipts, breath mints, an old lighter. Still nothing. "No, no. This can't be right," he whispered. He tore open the bottom zipper where he had originally stuffed what he thought was the ticket. His hands moved wildly now, panicked, pulling every piece of fabric inside out. Nothing but lint and shame. Mark dropped the bag and stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. He ran his hands through his hair, then turned to the nightstand and grabbed the note he had written to Sarah. "I took the ticket," he read aloud bitterly, mocking himself. "Tired of this miserable life. Gone for good." He chuckled, but it wasn't laughter. It was the hollow kind of noise a man makes when life punches him in the gut. He grabbed his phone, opened his messages, and stared at Sarah's contact. He wanted to call. To say something. Anything. But what could he say? "Hey, I left you in our marriage in the middle of the night because I thought I took your money, but I actually just took your dental reminder. He threw the phone onto the bed. This was supposed to be the start of his new life. But all he'd packed was guilt and failure. He slumped back down on the mattress, the slip of paper falling from his hand onto the floor. For the first time in years, Mark wasn't thinking about what he wanted. He was thinking about what he'd lost. Sarah's smile, her loyalty, her excitement last night, when she said, "We won, not I." And now? She probably hated him. And worse, she probably pitied him. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, mocking circles. There was no money, no grand escape, only silence, and a very expensive mistake. The silence on the other end of the phone was louder than any insult she could have spoken. Mark stared at his phone as if it were the last lifeline left in the world. The contact name, Sarah Red Heart. That heart used to mean something. Now it just looked like a cruel emoji mocking him. He hovered his thumb over the call button, breathed in, and tapped. It rang once, twice. His leg bounced nervously. Pick up, please pick up. Straight to voicemail. He cursed under his breath and ended the call. Waited 5 seconds. Tried again. This time, it rang longer. His heart dared to hope. Then, click. Voicemail again. Sarah, he said quickly, trying to sound casual. Hey, it's me. Look, I know this is sudden, but I think we should talk. Something went wrong. Just call me, okay? Please. He ended the call and tossed the phone on the bed again. A moment passed. He grabbed it and texted instead. Can we talk? It's important. Please. 3 dots appeared. His pulse jumped. Then they disappeared. He called again. Voicemail. Damn it, Sarah, he barked, standing up and pacing the room. Don't do this. You can't just freeze me out. He tried her WhatsApp. Nothing. Facebook Messenger. Read. No reply. Instagram. She had unfollowed him. He opened their shared Google Drive folder. Files gone. Closed access. His heart pounded louder than the crashing ocean outside his window. She was gone, and not in a panic, but with precision. It dawned on him. She wasn't shocked anymore. She was done, and he wasn't just the man who tried to steal her money. He was the fool who failed. He slumped onto the bed, staring at his reflection in the dark TV screen. His own eyes looked back, not victorious, not powerful, not free, just empty. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. He sent one more message, just 2 words. I'm sorry. But even as he hit send, he knew. She wasn't reading it. And if she was reading it with the confidence of a woman who already knew the ticket was never in his hands, because her future never depended on him. He thought leaving her would destroy her, but all he really did was set her free. Sarah stood at the edge of the city bus terminal, her suitcase beside her, the early morning mist curling around her coat. She wore a simple hoodie, hair tucked into a cap, no makeup, no jewelry, just invisibility. And that's exactly how she wanted it. No one would suspect the quiet woman at Gate 7 of carrying a ticket worth $10 million. She had left no trace behind, no goodbye text, no calls, no social media posts. Even the neighbors hadn't seen her leave. Just a soft morning, a taxi at dawn, and a one-way trip out of a life that nearly buried her. Inside her coat pocket, folded neatly in a small envelope, was the lottery ticket. The real one. It was time to claim it. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in the back seat of a rideshare vehicle outside the regional lottery office. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the envelope to her chest. Not from fear, from the weight of what this moment meant. Everything was about to change. When she walked in, the woman at the front desk gave her a polite smile. Good morning. Can I help you? Yes, Sarah said softly. I just want a new life. She handed over the envelope. The woman opened it, scanned the numbers, then looked back up. Ma'am, she said, stunned, I need to get my supervisor. Within the hour, it was official. Confirmed. Verified. $10 million. Sarah signed the documents under a new mailing address, gave instructions for her lawyer to be the point of contact, and requested that her identity be kept confidential. She didn't want the spotlight. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted peace, and a life where no one could walk out with her happiness ever again. As she walked back outside, the sky looked clearer than she remembered. For the first time in years, the air felt light. Not because she was rich, but because she was no longer tied to someone who only saw her value in dollars. She opened her phone. No missed calls, Just one unread message from an unknown number. Please, Sarah, just talk to me. She stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Because sometimes healing means never responding. Sometimes power is silence. She didn't just rise. She rebuilt. On her own terms. 2 months later, the moving truck pulled up to a quiet neighborhood nestled in the hills outside the city. The sun painted golden streaks across the roof of a freshly purchased two-story house, white with navy shutters, a wraparound porch, and wide windows that invited peace into every corner. Sarah stood at the gate, holding the keys in her hand. No paparazzi, no attention, just a lawyer who followed her instructions to the letter. Every document signed, every purchase clean and quiet. She hadn't used her married name. She didn't need it anymore. Inside the house, the air smelled like new paint and polished floors. The furniture was still being arranged, but the space already felt like hers. There was no trace of betrayal here. No drawer holding broken dreams. Only room to breathe and bloom. In the kitchen, Sarah unpacked a small box labeled Hope Project. It wasn't just her life she wanted to rebuild. It was time to give women like her a second chance. The ones abandoned, underestimated, or made to feel small. A week later, she signed the lease on a small office downtown. She named the charity Second Bloom, a foundation dedicated to helping women restart their lives after emotional and financial abuse. Counseling, housing support, skills training, legal advice. No lectures, no pity, just power, passed from one survivor to another. And when the press asked who was behind it, her response was simple. Just a woman who remembers what it felt like to have nowhere else to go. She didn't need to tell them about Mark. She didn't need to tell them about the drawer. Her silence made the statement louder than any speech. In private, she made other moves, investments in real estate, a trust fund for future daughters she hadn't even had yet, and quiet donations to shelters in cities she'd never even lived in. It wasn't about publicity. It was about purpose. Every night, she sat on the porch of her new home, watching the stars stretch out over the hills, sipping tea with her peace intact. He took nothing from her. He just freed her hands to build something greater. There were still moments she thought about the note he left. The cowardice of it. The emptiness. But the feeling didn't sting anymore. Because now she knew exactly who she was. And no man could take it from her. She didn't chase fame. But healing has a way of shining, even when you try to hide. The magazine sat on every cafe table across the city, its glossy cover catching the sunlight and turning heads. In large, bold letters at the top, it read, "From betrayal to billionaire. The woman who disappeared and then changed lives." And there she was, Sarah, not in a designer dress, not in heavy makeup or diamond jewelry, just a soft pastel blouse, natural hair pulled into a bun, and a smile that didn't try too hard, because it didn't need to. The photo had been taken outside her charity's headquarters. She hadn't even known the journalist was taking the shot until after the interview ended. Inside the magazine, her story unfolded like something from a film. A quiet wife, a sudden lottery win, a husband who vanished into the night, and a twist that stunned readers across the region. He took a piece of paper and ran. The article read, "But the real treasure stayed behind with the woman he underestimated." The article didn't name Mark. Sarah had insisted on that. It wasn't about him. It was about rising. It covered the launch of Second Bloom, her vision to fund shelters in 3 neighboring cities, and the hundreds of women her foundation had already supported, many of whom now worked as mentors and staff. There was even a sidebar with testimonies. "She gave me more than money. She gave me dignity. I never thought someone would understand. Then I met her. She turned her pain into purpose, and we're all better for it." Across the city, people who had once passed her by without a glance were now pointing at her photo in admiration. Bankers, politicians, TV presenters. They all wanted to meet the woman who had quietly become a symbol of grace and strength. But Sarah didn't let it go to her head. She still arrived at the foundation every morning by 9 a.m., made coffee for her staff, and reviewed every application by hand. The only real change. Her inbox now overflowed with speaking invitations, donation offers, and business proposals. She accepted none. She wasn't looking to be famous. She was just whole. That evening, as she sat on her porch again, a neighbor passed by with the magazine in hand. "Is this really you?" the woman asked, grinning. Sarah smiled. "Depends who you ask." They both laughed. Then the woman leaned in and whispered, "Whoever hurt you? They must be kicking themselves." Sarah said nothing, but deep down she knew. He didn't just lose money. He lost the kind of woman men don't get twice. He ran from a life he thought was worthless. Now he stood before it, vanished, sold, and no longer his. Mark stood across the street from what used to be his home. The same driveway, the same mailbox with the chipped edge, but something felt different. The curtains were drawn, the front garden freshly pruned, and a small white sign stood in the grass. Sold. He stared at it for a long moment, expecting the wave of anger, maybe frustration. But instead, all he felt was hollow. The windows looked unfamiliar now. The front porch, once cluttered with forgotten deliveries and arguments left unsaid, was spotless. Even the wind seemed quieter on this street. He crossed the road slowly, hesitated at the gate, and peered inside. Gone were the flower pots Sarah used to water every Saturday morning. Gone was the welcome mat with their initials. And most jarring of all, gone was the woman who used to open that door with tired eyes and a patient smile. Mark stepped back, confused. He walked to the neighbor's house and knocked. The door creaked open. "Mark." It was Mrs. Delaney, their old neighbor, raising an eyebrow behind her glasses. "Yeah," he said awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "Do you know where Sarah went?" She gave him a long, pointed look. "She left weeks ago, moved out in the middle of the night, said she needed a new beginning." He nodded slowly, trying to act unfazed. "Did she leave a forwarding address?" Mrs. Delaney crossed her arms. "She said if anyone came looking, especially you, she didn't want to be found." Mark swallowed hard. Without another word, she shut the door. He turned back to the street, but it was no longer his. The home he abandoned, the woman he betrayed, both gone. And in their place, just a clean slate that didn't include him. He thought he left her behind, but she was the one who erased him. Once he thought they would all understand. Now no one even wanted to listen. Mark walked up the stairs to Darren and Monica's apartment. Once a familiar place, filled with game nights, laughter, and the smell of Sarah's favorite garlic bread Monica made just for her. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door creaked open. Monica's expression said everything. "What are you doing here, Mark?" He tried a half smile. "I was hoping to talk. Maybe just for a minute." She didn't move. Didn't invite him in. Behind her, he could see Darren on the couch, staring but silent. I need to know where Sarah went." Monica raised her eyebrows. "Why? So you can take another thing from her?" Mark flinched. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? I panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. I thought that she was just a pit stop on your road to happiness." She cut in, voice like ice. "That she'd cry, beg, and wait around for you? No. I thought she'd understand." Monica shook her head, almost pitying him now. "You don't get it, do you? She didn't just leave you, Mark. She closed the book. Nobody's telling you where she is. Not because we're hiding her, but because she asked us not to care anymore." Behind Monica, Darren finally stood. "You should go." Mark turned around without another word. But the silence followed him. One by one, he visited others, co-workers they'd both known, couples they'd dined with, even her old college roommate. Each door was colder than the last. Some wouldn't open at all. Others gave polite lies. "Sorry, we haven't heard from her." But their eyes said, "We know what you did. And we're done with you too." He sat alone that evening in a downtown cafe they used to visit, watching couples pass by the window. He remembered how Sarah used to laugh at the most boring jokes, how she'd rest her head on his shoulder even when tired, how she'd said, "I want to share everything with you," the day she held up that lottery ticket. He thought he'd outsmarted her, but now he was learning. When a good woman walks away, she doesn't just disappear. She becomes unreachable, and the world helps her stay that way. He thought she'd break without him. Instead, she became the kind of woman headlines admire. Mark sat at the corner of a coffee shop downtown, nursing a lukewarm drink he hadn't touched in 10 minutes. His eyes were distant, unfocused, until a familiar voice from the counter snapped him back to reality. "Excuse me, do you have the new Metro Today magazine? The one with the charity woman on the cover?" He turned sharply. The barista handed over a glossy magazine with a proud smile. "Oh yeah, that story's everywhere. People love her. Real-life fairy tale stuff." Mark's eyes locked on the cover. There she was. Sarah. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Billionaire. The mystery woman behind Second Bloom." He blinked hard. Time seemed to freeze. There was no rage in her photo. No trace of the tears he imagined she'd shed. Just grace, strength, poise. She wore a white blouse, simple pearl earrings, and a smile that spoke volumes. But it was her eyes that stopped him, calm, assured, free. Mark grabbed a copy from the stand, fumbling to open the pages. The story unfolded like a blade through his pride. After a painful betrayal by her husband following a major lottery win, Sarah chose not to publicly name him. Instead, she vanished and re-emerged with a mission to help women rebuild their lives. He read every word, every quote, about the shelters, the women, the awards. Then came the line that shattered what was left of his self-image. She has declined all interviews about her past, saying only, "What broke me once now funds my strength. And I owe nothing to the man who thought I was small." Mark lowered the magazine. His fingers trembled slightly as he placed it back on the table. The room spun a little, not from dizziness, but from a cruel clarity. He hadn't just lost a woman. He lost a legacy, a story he could have been part of, but chose greed instead. He stared down at the cheap phone in his pocket, filled with unanswered texts, voicemails sent into silence. All of it meaningless now. There was no fixing this. Sarah had rewritten the ending, and there was no mention of him. The final nail was on the last page of the article. A photo of Sarah at a gala, smiling beside children holding flowers, with a caption that read, "Her greatest win wasn't the money, it was walking away." Mark folded the magazine shut and leaned back in his chair. This was the day he realized. She didn't need revenge. She only needed the world to see who she really was. Without him. And now, the whole world did. He left in the night thinking he held fortune in his hands. But now, even the wind refused to remember his name. Mark shuffled down a cracked sidewalk in a forgotten corner of the city, his clothes wrinkled, his shoes worn at the heel. The collar of his coat turned up against the cold, but it wasn't winter that made him shiver. It was regret. In his hand, folded and unfolded so many times it looked like parchment, was the same slip of paper he had stolen that night. A meaningless note, faded now from time, sweat, and his own trembling fingers. He still carried it, as if the act of holding it could rewind time. He didn't know where he was going anymore. The hotel had asked him to leave weeks ago when the deposit ran dry. Friends had stopped replying. Job applications? No callbacks. The charm he once wore like cologne had long since worn off. Now, only silence greeted him. He stopped at a small park bench, not far from a school playground. Children ran by, their laughter echoing the kind of life he'd never known how to build. Mark sat down slowly and opened the paper one more time, as if, just maybe, it would say something different. But no, still blank. Just like his future. Just like the heart he'd betrayed. He looked up at the sky, overcast and gray, then glanced at a nearby newspaper stand. Sarah's face wasn't on any cover now. She didn't need to be. Her work was bigger than headlines. She had moved on. The world had moved on. Only he stayed stuck. He had chosen escape over honesty. Greed over gratitude. A lie over a life that loved him. And in return, he got exactly what he ran toward. Nothing. He had replayed the moment in his head 1,000 times. The drawer. The note. The bag. The way he thought he was clever, quick, destined to start a better life without her. But the drawer had held more than a lottery ticket. It held his last chance at being something more than empty. And now, all he had was this worthless paper. A cruel reminder that sometimes the things we throw away are the very things we were never meant to lose. He folded it once more and tucked it back into his pocket, even though he had nowhere else to go. The park began to empty. Evening was falling. Lights flickered on in distant windows. Warm homes filled with families, with love, with second chances. None of them were his. Because when he left Sarah, he didn't just walk away from money. He walked away from his only true fortune. Once upon a modern time, a man mistook luck for ownership and love for entitlement. And by the time he realized the difference, the door had closed, and the key was lost forever. This wasn't just the story of a lottery ticket. It was the story of a woman who loved quietly, gave everything she had, and still wasn't enough. Not for the man who vowed to cherish her. But fate has a way of revealing what's hidden in the dark and rewarding the hearts that endure. Sarah never chased fortune. She bought her ticket with pocket change and hope, not desperation. When the numbers aligned, she didn't scream or faint or post it online. She simply turned to her husband, the man she believed in, and said, "We've been blessed. Let's build something beautiful." But Mark didn't hear the blessing. He only heard the sound of doors unlocking, doors he thought would lead to power, freedom, and pleasure. He didn't even stop to look at the ticket. Because when you're blind with greed, you don't check what you're holding. You just run. And so he did. A note. A lie. A coward's exit through the back door of a shared life. But here's the twist no thief expects. In his haste, he stole the wrong thing. And in doing so, gave Sarah the greatest gift of all. Freedom. With the real ticket still in her hands, she didn't waste time crying over betrayal. She stood. She relocated. She rebuilt. And she rose. She used her winnings not just to heal, but to help. To become a lighthouse for women who had been left in the dark. She didn't post revenge quotes or send him threats. She didn't even speak his name again. Why? Because a lioness doesn't roar at rats. She walks forward, regal, untouchable. As for Mark, he learned a truth many discover too late. When you steal what you don't understand, you lose what you never deserved. He wandered through life, clutching a blank piece of paper, a perfect symbol of what he had become. Empty, faded, forgotten. And now, her name opens doors across the country, while his isn't even spoken anymore. So what's the lesson in this tale? Not every story ends with thunder and applause. Some end quietly, with the woman walking forward and the man left watching from behind. Greed counts the price of things, but never their worth. And some prices are final. If this story touched you, made you reflect, or reminded you of someone you know, don't scroll away. Share this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. What would you do if you were Sarah? Would you forgive him, or move on forever? Because in the end, some people aren't a loss, they're just a lesson. And some blessings only bloom after betrayal.